Eliana and Ezra had never signed a marriage certificate, never had a grand ceremony, and never wore rings. Yet, their bond was stronger than most couples who did. They had met by chance at a bookshop, both reaching for the same novel. From that moment on, their connection grew, not out of obligation, but out of something deeper: mutual understanding. Years passed, and they built a life together, traveling the world, comforting each other in moments of sorrow, and celebrating life's small victories. Their love wasn't confined by legalities. It thrived in late-night conversations, in silent embraces after long days, and in knowing glances that spoke volumes. When Eliana lost her job, Ezra didn't see it as just her struggle, he saw it as theirs. He cooked for her, encouraged her, and reminded her of her worth when she doubted herself. And when Ezra's father fell ill, Eliana became his rock, holding his hand through the hardest days without ever needing to be asked. Society often measured love by documents and traditions, but Eliana and Ezra knew differently. Love wasn't about titles. It was about the way she instinctively knew when he needed space, or how he could tell when she was feeling overwhelmed before she even said a word. It was about trust, a shared language of emotions, and the quiet certainty that, no matter what, they belonged to each other. One evening, as they sat on their balcony watching the sun dip below the horizon, Eliana turned to Ezra and whispered, "I don't need a wedding to know that I choose you every single day." Ezra smiled, squeezing her hand. "And I'll keep choosing you in every lifetime." As the years unfolded, Eliana and Ezra's bond only grew stronger. Without the pressures of societal expectations, they created their own version of commitment, one built on choice rather than obligation. One winter evening, as rain drummed softly against their windows, Eliana found an old photo album tucked away in a forgotten corner of their bookshelf. She flipped through its pages, tracing the memories with her fingertips: snapshots of sunlit beaches, handwritten notes tucked into restaurant napkins, and candid pictures of them laughing, completely unaware of the camera. Ezra glanced up from his book and chuckled. "Remember this one?" He pointed to a photo of Eliana on a rickety bicycle, mid-fall, in a cobblestone alley in Italy. She rolled her eyes playfully. "I still say that pothole came out of nowhere." They laughed, but then Eliana's expression softened. "You know, sometimes I wonder, does it ever bother you that we never made it official?" Ezra set his book aside and reached for her hand. "You mean marriage?" He shook his head gently. "Not even for a second. What we have is more than official, it's real. We don't need a certificate to prove that." Eliana sighed, leaning into him. "I know. But sometimes, the world makes it feel like love needs validation. Like we have to explain why we chose this path." Ezra wrapped an arm around her, his voice steady and sure. "Let the world think what it wants. I don't need anyone else to define what we have. Love isn't about what's on paper, it's about how we show up for each other, every day, without conditions." And they did. Through career changes, family losses, and unexpected detours, their love never wavered. It was in the way Ezra brought Eliana coffee just the way she liked it, without asking. In the way Eliana stayed up late to help Ezra finish his passion project, even when she was exhausted. In the way they faced life as a team, side by side, through every storm and sunrise. One evening, while watching the waves crash against the shore on a quiet getaway, Ezra turned to Eliana and said, "If love is a choice, then I'll keep choosing you every day for as long as I live." Eliana smiled, resting her head against his shoulder. "And I'll keep choosing you in every lifetime." Seasons changed, and so did Eliana and Ezra. Their love wasn't stagnant, it evolved, deepened, and adapted to the rhythm of life. Some days were filled with adventure, spontaneous road trips, and laughter that echoed through the walls of their small apartment. Other days were quiet, filled with the comfort of simply existing together. One autumn morning, as golden leaves fluttered outside their window, Eliana sat at the kitchen table, lost in thought. Ezra noticed the crease between her brows as she absently stirred her tea. "Penny for your thoughts?" he asked, sitting across from her. She hesitated before sighing. "I saw an old friend yesterday. She asked when we were finally getting married. When I told her we weren't, she looked at me like we were unfinished, like something was missing." Ezra reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "And do you feel like something is missing?" Eliana met his gaze, searching within herself for an answer. Finally, she smiled softly. "No. No, I don't. Not even a little. Ezra grinned. Good. Because love isn't about meeting someone else's expectations, it's about what feels right for us. And it did. Their life together wasn't measured by grand gestures or societal milestones, but by the little things that held them together, how they instinctively reached for each other's hand in a crowded room, how they could sit in comfortable silence for hours, and how they understood each other's hearts without words. But life, as always, had its share of storms. One winter, Ezra's mother fell ill. The weight of it pressed heavily on him, and for the first time in a long time, he struggled to hold himself together. He spent long nights at the hospital, exhaustion written all over his face. Eliana never left his side. She brought him food he forgot to eat, whispered reassurances when words failed him, and held him when the grief became too much to bear. "You don't have to be strong all the time, Ezra," she whispered one night as he finally let himself break. "I know," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Because you're here. And that's enough." Through pain and loss, through joy and celebration, they remained each other's home. Years passed, and though they never walked down an aisle, never exchanged vows before an audience, they knew that what they had was rare, unshakable, and profoundly real. One evening, sitting by the sea, Eliana turned to Ezra with a playful smirk. "You know, if we had gotten married years ago, today might have been our anniversary." Ezra chuckled. "Good thing we celebrate each other every day then." She smiled, leaning into him. "Yeah, and I'd still choose you. Again and again." He kissed the top of her head, pulling her close. "And I'd still choose you. In this life and the next." The years continued to unfold like the pages of a well-worn book, some chapters brimming with adventure, others marked by quiet moments of resilience. Through it all, Eliana and Ezra remained steadfast, tethered by an invisible thread of trust, understanding, and an unshakable love that defied convention. One spring afternoon, they found themselves wandering through an antique market, weaving between old books, weathered trinkets, and relics of forgotten stories. Eliana's fingers brushed over a delicate locket, its gold edges softened with time. She held it up to the light, smiling. "It looks like something out of a love story," she mused. Ezra glanced at it and smirked. "You mean our love story?" She chuckled. "Maybe. Except there's no grand wedding, no dramatic proposals." Ezra took the locket from her hand, examining it. "But there's something better," he said, looking at her with that quiet certainty she had come to cherish. "There's us." She knew then, as she always had, that love wasn't defined by a single moment, it was a collection of a million little ones. One summer, life threw them an unexpected curve. Eliana's father, whom she had always admired for his quiet strength, suffered a stroke. In an instant, her world tilted on its axis. Hospitals became her second home, and the air was thick with the scent of antiseptic and worry. Eliana, who had always been the one to lift others, suddenly found herself lost in a fog of uncertainty. Ezra became her anchor. He handled the things she couldn't, fielding difficult conversations with doctors, making sure she ate when she had no appetite, holding her through sleepless nights when the weight of it all felt unbearable. "You don't have to carry this alone, Eliana," he reminded her when she tried to insist she was fine. "I know," she whispered, gripping his hand. "Because you're here. And that's enough." It was in those moments, in the unspoken promises, that she understood something profound. Commitment wasn't about a wedding. It was about showing up, even in the hardest, messiest moments. Years passed, and one autumn evening, as they sat by the fireplace in their little home, Ezra pulled out a small, weathered box. "What's this?" Eliana asked, raising an eyebrow. He opened it to reveal the old locket from the antique shop, polished and gleaming. Inside was a tiny, folded piece of paper. She unfolded it carefully, eyes scanning his familiar handwriting. "For every lifetime, I choose you." Her breath caught. Ezra took her hand, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. "I never needed a ceremony or vows to know you're my forever. But if you ever wanted something to hold onto, something just for us, this is it." Eliana felt tears prick at her eyes, a slow smile forming on her lips. She fastened the locket around her neck, the weight of it warm against her skin. "I don't need a piece of paper, Ezra," she whispered. "Because I already have everything that matters." The years continued to pass, weaving their love story in ways neither of them could have predicted. Life had its ups and downs, But through every challenge, every celebration, and every quiet moment in between, Eliana and Ezra remained unwavering in their devotion to each other. One crisp autumn morning, as golden leaves tumbled from the trees outside their window, Eliana sat on the edge of their bed, staring down at the locket around her neck. It had become more than just a piece of jewelry. It was a quiet reminder of the love they had built, day by day, choice by choice. Ezra walked in with 2 steaming cups of coffee, setting one beside her. He noticed the faraway look in her eyes. "Lost in thought?" he asked. She nodded, offering him a small smile. "Just thinking about how much time has passed, how much we've been through." Ezra sat beside her, draping an arm around her shoulders. "We've lived a whole lifetime together, haven't we?" She leaned into him. "And I wouldn't trade a second of it." One day, while strolling through their favorite park, Eliana suddenly stopped walking. Ezra turned to her, sensing something was off. "Are you okay?" he asked. She hesitated before exhaling softly. "Lately, I've been thinking, maybe it's time to make it official." Ezra blinked, surprised. 4 years, they had been perfectly content without marriage, their bond needing no validation. But he could see the sincerity in her eyes. "What changed?" he asked gently. Eliana shrugged. "I don't know. Maybe it's just the idea of growing old together, knowing we've chosen each other in every possible way. Maybe I just want something to mark this life we've built together." Ezra took her hands, squeezing them. "Then let's do it. But only if it's what you truly want, not because the world tells us we should." She smiled, feeling the warmth of his unwavering support. "It's what I want." When the day finally came, there were no extra elegant decorations, no long guest list, no white dress. Instead, they stood on the same beach where they had once whispered their quiet promises to each other, the waves rolling in rhythm with their hearts. Their vows were simple. No rehearsed speeches, no scripted lines, just words spoken from the soul. "I have chosen you every day," Eliana said, looking into his eyes. "And I will keep choosing you, for as long as I have breath in me." Ezra smiled, his voice steady and full of love. "No paper, no ceremony could ever define what we already have. But today, I give you my name, my everything, not because I need to, but because I want to." And with the sun dipping below the horizon, they sealed their vows with a kiss, not as proof of their love, but as a quiet affirmation of what had always been true. Love had never been about legality. It had been about the way they had built a life together, the way they had stood by each other through storms and sunshine alike. And now, as husband and wife,